The money in your account is losing value right now. Not because of inflation reports or interest rate decisions. Not because of something that happened last quarter. Because of a decision made decades before you were born. And nobody corrected it. Nobody warned you. They just let the system run. Most people believe money is neutral, a tool, a unit of measurement, something that holds value until you decide to spend it. That belief is the foundation of how most people make financial decisions. And it is wrong. Not slightly off, not oversimplified. Wrong in a way that costs the average person hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. And the people who understand the truth, they've been quietly on the other side of that cost the entire time. To understand what's actually happening, you have to go back to how money enters the world. Not how it's earned. Not how it's spent. How it's created. Most people imagine money as something that exists, sitting in vaults, printed on demand, distributed by governments. That's not how it works. Money is created the moment a loan is made. When a bank issues a mortgage, that money didn't exist before the contract was signed. The bank didn't pull it from deposits, didn't take it from another account. It created it, from nothing, backed by your promise to repay. This is not a fringe theory. This is documented banking practice. It's called fractional reserve lending, and it is the mechanism behind every major economy on Earth. New loan, new money, new debt, same transaction. Now here is where the architecture becomes visible. Every dollar created comes attached to interest, but only the principal was created. The interest was never put into circulation. So when you borrow $100,000, the $100,000 exists. The $180,000 you'll repay over 30 years. That was never created. It has to come from somewhere else. Someone else's loan, someone else's economic activity, someone else's savings being eroded. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system. Because if you follow that logic to its end, there is always more debt in the world than money to repay it. Always. The gap never closes. To keep the system functioning, more loans must be made. More money must be created. The supply must expand. Permanently, indefinitely. Not because economies are booming, not because people are thriving. Because the math demands it. And here is what expansion means for you. When the money supply grows, when more dollars enter circulation, the value of each existing dollar falls. Not dramatically, not in a single moment, slowly, measurably, continuously. This is inflation, not the version explained on the news, not the sanitized statistic announced every quarter. The actual mechanism, the cause, not the symptom. Prices don't rise because things become more valuable. Prices rise because the unit being used to measure them, the dollar, becomes worth less. The loaf of bread didn't change. The money did. The Federal Reserve calls it a target inflation rate, 2% per year. Controlled, manageable, almost invisible. 2% sounds harmless, but 2% compounded means your money loses half its purchasing power in 35 years. If you're 30 years old and saving diligently, the dollars you're protecting today will buy roughly half as much when you retire. That is not a side effect. That is the stated goal. They published it. They just didn't explain what it means for the person doing the saving. Now watch where the money goes. When new money enters the system, it doesn't spread evenly. It doesn't land proportionally in every bank account, every paycheck, every grocery budget. It moves. It moves fast, and it moves toward assets. Real estate, equities, commodities, anything with limited supply and real-world utility. The price of those assets rises. Not because they became more productive or more valuable in any objective sense, because the money supply expanded, and more dollars are now chasing the same number of houses, the same number of shares, the same finite amount of land. Asset prices are not rising. The currency measuring them is falling. The asset stayed still. The floor dropped. This is where the split happens. This is where the system begins to show its shape, because there are two groups of people in this environment. The first group holds cash. They save. They're careful. They do what responsible people are supposed to do. And every year, quietly, their purchasing power contracts. The second group holds assets, real estate, index funds, private equity, ownership of things that exist in the physical world. And every year, as the money supply expands, the nominal value of those assets rises. The first group followed the rules. The second group understood the game. Now look at how the wealthy actually use this system. Not in theory, in practice. A person with significant capital doesn't store that capital in cash. They use it as collateral. They go to a bank, often a private bank with rates inaccessible to ordinary borrowers, and they take out a loan at low interest against the assets they already own. They use that loan to acquire more assets. Real estate, equity positions, hard assets with long-term value. Now they own more. And they didn't liquidate anything to do it. The inflation that erodes your savings, it works in their favor. Because their debt, the loan they took, becomes cheaper to repay in real terms as inflation rises. They borrowed in today's dollars. They repay in tomorrow's dollars. Tomorrow's dollars are worth less. The debt shrinks, the asset grows. Meanwhile, the rental income, the dividends, the returns, those adjust with inflation too. They are not just protected from the system. They are positioned to profit from the exact mechanism that drains everyone else. This is the asymmetry. The same inflation that is a slow tax on the person holding cash is a financial tailwind for the person holding leveraged assets. Same system, same mechanism, opposite outcomes. And the difference is not intelligence, it's not discipline, it's not even how hard someone worked. It's which side of the transaction they're on. Debt-financed asset ownership versus cash savings. One position benefits from money creation. The other one pays for it. The advice most people receive their entire lives points them toward the wrong side. Save money. Build an emergency fund. Don't take on debt. That advice isn't malicious, but it is incomplete in a very specific way. It teaches people to protect cash, without explaining that cash is the one thing in this system that is structurally guaranteed to lose. It teaches people to fear debt, without explaining that strategic, asset-backed debt is the primary tool the wealthy use to build and preserve wealth. The advice sounds responsible, but in the context of how this system actually functions, it keeps people exactly where the system needs them, on the losing side of the transaction, contributing to the expansion through their labor, their taxes, their spending, while the value of what they've saved quietly bleeds out. None of this is classified. The Federal Reserve publishes its mechanisms. Central banks explain quantitative easing in public statements. The relationship between money supply and asset prices is a subject of mainstream economic research. It's not hidden. It's presented in a language designed for people who already know what they're looking at. And for everyone else, the gap between the official explanation and the lived experience is wide enough to lose a lifetime of savings in. So what does it look like when you finally see it? It looks like your grandparents' house, the one they bought for $30,000, being worth $600,000 today. Not because the house changed, because the dollar did. It looks like stock markets reaching all-time highs during economic crises that crushed working people. Not because the economy was healthy, because the money supply expanded and that money had to go somewhere. It looks like wages that grow slowly, steadily, predictably, while asset prices grow at a rate that makes wages feel like they're standing still. And they are. Relative to the assets, they always will be. Because wages are paid in the currency that's losing value. And assets are priced in that same currency. So the gap between them doesn't close. It compounds, year after year. The system doesn't need you to understand this to keep functioning. In fact, it functions better when you don't. A person who believes cash is a store of value will spend their life accumulating it. They will work longer hours, save more carefully, sacrifice more, and the purchasing power of what they've built will quietly contract. While on the other side of the ledger, someone who borrowed against an asset they bought years ago is watching that debt shrink in real terms while the asset appreciates. Same economy, same inflation rate. Completely opposite outcomes. This is not a reason for anger. Anger doesn't change the mechanics, but clarity does. Because once you see the actual structure, not the surface version, not the textbook version, you cannot unsee it. And every financial decision looks different from the other side of that understanding. Not what to do with money, but what money actually is. What it's doing while you hold it. What it's doing while someone else doesn't. The most important financial question most people never ask is this: if this system was designed to protect the value of your money, why does it keep failing at that? Every year, without exception. By design. Maybe it wasn't designed to protect your money at all. Maybe it was designed to move it. And the only question that remains is whether you're on the side doing the moving, or the side being moved. If you find value in understanding the systems behind wealth, power, and history, consider subscribing. Here on Silent Standard, we explore the financial strategies, institutions, and ideas that shape the world we live in today. Thank you for watching.